I think he's almost become a vessel for people's disenchantment with the status quo. When I first asked about how Keir Starmer was doing, they laughed. This is when you know a politician has lost it.
Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction with me, Beth Rigby.
And me, Harriet Harman.
And me, Ruth Davidson.
And I'm joining you both from the constituency that's become the centre of the political universe of late. I'm in a very, very rainy Makerfield where I've just been speaking to local voters to find out what they think, literally just as Keir Starmer suffered another body blow to his leadership because his defence secretary resigned on Thursday lunchtime. So more chaos in Westminster.
So we'll bring you everything those voters said, and we'll have our favourite pollster, Luke Trill from More in Common, with us to chat through all of it in just a moment. But I should do the legal T's and C's, which is to say that there'll be a full list of all the candidates standing in Makerfield in the video description below.
There's so much to discuss, and it's not just a big week in politics, it's also a big week for dysfunctioners, as we have very exciting news to bring you at the end of this pod.
But before we get to all of that, should we get into it and bring in Luke Trill? As I said, I'm in Makerfield and I'm currently in a community centre here with our good friend of the pod, Luke Trill, who's sitting next to me, Director of More in Common. And we've been having a lovely time together, haven't we, Luke?
We have had a lovely time together.
We pay him to say that, everyone. He's got his knees crossed and his fingers crossed. No, we have been having a lovely time because what have we been doing, Luke? Well, I haven't done much. You've actually done all the work today. What have we been doing?
So we've been carrying out a focus group of voters in Makerfield who will be making that decision. I mean, not just for themselves as to who becomes the new constituency MP for Makerfield, but potentially picking the next Prime Minister of the country. So it's, I mean, I've said before, I actually think if you go back through time, you can't think of a by-election which has had these sort of slightly weird contours where it's the local race, but also it's going to have these big national implications. And what was really striking was the people we spoke to, they really felt that. They felt that decision was on their shoulders. And some seemed to welcome it, others less so.
Let's hear from them directly. And let's start with the so-called King of the North, Andy Burnham. What did they have to say about Andy?
Andy Burnham, obviously, there's going to be a leadership challenge regardless of the outcome. So your choices then are looking like Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, Ed Miliband and possibly David Lammy. They're the names that are being touted. I'd rather have Andy Burnham than any of them.
Because people who I've worked with are quite split. It's a profession that you wouldn't expect them to go certain ways, and quite a lot are anti-Andy Burnham.
Yeah,
what's the
split?
What's the frustration with him?
Just what they feel he hasn't achieved or what he hasn't done for Manchester itself. So depending on what your profession was, it's quite impactful what he decides and what you have, what you don't have, what you do. And if you've seen the bad end of that, you wouldn't support him.
And do you think Andy Burnham does represent Labour values or more?
More so than Keir Starmer, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, it's something you can't put your finger on. I just think he's more in touch with people and, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's more in touch with people.
I like him more than Keir Starmer. I think he's more for the working class. That's how he just comes across, like he's one of us, rather than one of these politicians, like the majority of them, who you can't trust.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting was this idea, and there was a conversation that happened more widely than just the clips we've shown you, about who should be politicians. Should it be people that are plumbers? Do you need a mix of people? Do you need, sometimes educated or professional was used as a kind of like cipher for people who were more kind of career politicians, but the word career politician was used. And there was also quite a lot of sense of kind of them and us, that Keir Starmer was a them and he was different, but that Andy Burnham was an us and he was like us. And I thought it was quite ironic, really, because actually Keir Starmer's quite a late starter in politics. Like, he only came in a few years ago into the House of Commons, whereas Andy Burnham was Oxbridge, then he worked for a think tank, and then he was a SPAD, a special advisor, then he was an MP for 16 years, then he was a government minister, now he's the professional mayor of Manchester. So he literally is a career politician, but they made a distinction between him and Keir Starmer, and it was about relatability and I think a little bit of who sounds like them, looks like them, who talks like them, who has experiences that they can relate to.
And I think it's not so much identity politics, it's representational politics. Who can actually represent me because they can hear me, they can understand me, I could talk to him, and therefore he could represent me. So, I mean, on identity politics, Keir Starmer would win for all the reasons Ruth said, because he was not a career politician and does come from a working class background. But on representational politics, it's like Andy Burnham could represent us.
Yeah, I mean, also, the other thing I reflected on listening to this group, which clearly Mike, for example, made it very clear in the focus group that he had never voted Labour before, but he told me before we sat down that there was a coffee morning put on the other day and he actually went to meet Andy Burnham and he quite liked Andy Burnham, and he was talking about the enormity of the choice and electing not just a MP but potentially a Prime Minister, and that I was left with the impression that he might well lend Andy Burnham his vote. And I guess, Harriet, it really did drive home to me the idea that if Burnham manages to win this seat, if he manages to beat Reform in this seat and he comes to Westminster, I just think he's going to ride over Starmer. I mean, and especially, we can get onto the Healey thing, but when you listen to those voters, do you think he just becomes, as a prospect for Labour MPs, irresistible if he can be victorious here?
Well, it didn't surprise me at all that man said that he met him and he liked him, because actually anybody who's met Andy Burnham would find it impossible not to like him. He is genuinely likeable. And I think that Labour MPs, when deciding whether or not they do want to oust Keir Starmer and who they want to replace him with, will think about that likeability factor, but they'll be thinking about other things as well.
Well, I think what's really interesting, Harriet, there about whether, Andy Burnham can roll over Keir just in almost like a wave of popular support, is that the briefing that's been put out by Keir's team was that if there is going to be a leadership challenge, whether it comes from Wes, whether it comes from Andy Burnham, whether it's going to come from somewhere else, the Prime Minister will stay and fight, and he'll do a John Major and he'll win. And I think what this voter group showed really clearly is that if the Prime Minister does stand in any leadership contest, any MPs who come into contact with voters will very quickly learn that he's not a positive influence or a winner. And I think it could be actually quite embarrassing for the Prime Minister, and he'll probably need to be tapped on the shoulder, because this group, some of whom were Labour voters, some people who were very willing to give Keir the benefit of the doubt, some of whom voted for him 2 years ago to come in and become the broom that swept the country clean after the Tories, which they may not have liked, were so clear that he's not the guy.
And it struck with me because it's happened a few times before, and I always think this is when you know a politician has lost it, is when I first asked about how Keir Starmer was doing, they laughed. And I always think that when it moves from anger to laughing, to contempt and laughing, that is when you've gone sort of too far. And I've been really thinking all this week, actually, based on our groups, is there a world in which things turn around, things get better, and Keir Starmer reconnects? And I just can't see it.
Let's have a listen to what they said about Keir Starmer, because you get a really good picture about how people are feeling.
I don't know much about him, but I know that I don't like him. But when I'm actually asked that question, I can't tell you why I don't like him.
But that just supports all the U-turns they've done in relation.
The U-turns, exactly.
They go, right, we'll do this, and everyone goes, so they drop it and go back. Well, we won't do that. And then they do something else, and somebody. So how can they not have got this right with all the years they've had chance to plan it?
And so,
do you not think they actually got in because people didn't want Conservatives? And that's all it was.
I don't think he represents true Labour values. He doesn't represent the Labour Party that I've grown up with.
I mean, Luke, just in terms of the group and that kind of universe, they didn't agree. They disagreed on a lot. They agreeably disagreed on a lot of things, but they were unified in disliking Keir Starmer. I mean, there was not one person there that was willing to advocate for him in any way, but they don't know why they don't like him. I mean, why do you think that is? What's gone so wrong for him?
I mean, it's a difficult one, right? But I think some of the early decisions, I think, set the government off on the wrong track.
Yeah.
I also think, and you sort of heard it, this, like, most people don't want to be that tuned into politics, in the sense he hasn't delivered that politics that treads more lightly, I think, is part of it as well. I also think now, and you heard it in that group, just the sheer number of U-turns has cut through to people. And what I think has happened is, because Keir Starmer doesn't project a sort of vision of his own, he's actually quite anti-politics, and I think saw it as a virtue. What has instead happened is people have projected everything that they don't like onto him.
Yes.
I think he's almost become a vessel for people's disenchantment with the status quo.
In terms of the stuff on U-turns, there's been a strategy. We've talked about this in the pod before. There has been a strategy at CCHQ that they're going to see which way the wind is blowing with Labour, know when they're going to change course, get ahead of it, call for it, and then claim the win afterwards. And I think this John Healey resignation that we've seen, which happened while we were actually at this focus group, is quite an interesting one, because a lot of people were sort of scratching their heads yesterday as to why, or on Wednesday, as to why Kemi Badenoch was going on defence spending and a review that hadn't dropped yet. It's a really difficult one to get out of if you're the Prime Minister. This
resignation dropped, as you said, Ruth, just as we were starting the focus group, and it was a real jaw-dropping statement from John Healey, who has always been outwardly very loyal to Keir Starmer, and it was solely focused on defence spending. And he said, as Defence Secretary, he could not continue in the job. He said that the Development Investment Plan financial settlement, which he revealed he had not even seen in full until Monday afternoon this week, he said it fell well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time. He said that the Prime Minister had been unable and the Treasury unwilling to commit the resources the nation needs. And he also said that if this defence investment plan doesn't, as he sees it, meet the moment of the risks that the UK is facing, he said, I'm being forced to make decisions that would reduce the readiness of our forces, increase the risk to personnel and operations, and could make this country less safe. He said, after explaining to you I would not be able to accept this settlement because it does not give our forces the resources they need, I am now left with no other option than to submit my resignation as your Defence Secretary. I mean, it is so damning. It paints a picture of a Prime Minister that is not willing to put enough resource behind defence, which Keir Starmer said he would move mountains to do. It's a highly principled, very courageous, actually, decision, I think, by John Healey, and he has walked out. He doesn't make any other reference to any other difficulties around Keir Starmer, but it also paints a picture, I think, of a Prime Minister that is either unwilling or perhaps more likely unable to force these changes through his own cabinet because he's requiring cuts elsewhere. And it really does. It left me with just this impression of just how dead this premiership is, like how done it is. And I do think that this will hasten the potential departure of Keir Starmer. I mean, I think it's a massive body blow. What do you think, Harriet? Do you disagree with me?
I think it is a massive body blow, as you say. And the thing about John Healey is he was regarded as a very successful defence secretary, commanding the respect and confidence of the armed forces, a good communicator about what was going on in the armed services. And I think he was well respected by Labour MPs and across the House, but also because often people would have said about Keir Starmer, well, he hasn't done so well back here in this country, but what he's done abroad, what he's done on defence has worked. You know, he's been seen as a good and successful figure in NATO. You know, he's stood up well on decisions in relation to Ukraine. And so to have this criticism about how he's worked on the non-domestic things makes it, it pulls the rug out from under his feet on what he's done abroad, as well as the problems that he's faced here at home. And I think it also puts more pressure on Rachel Reeves, because people are saying, well, why couldn't she come up with the spending that was necessary?
The other thing he said in the letter, which really, I knew it, but to see him write it down, he said, as you told us last week, Prime Minister, our own intelligence sources and other NATO countries think that Russia could well invade or would be another NATO ally by 2030. I mean, I knew that was what was being discussed. But for John Healey to put that down in black and white and say to the Prime Minister, you've acknowledged this and you're still not meeting this moment, I found that shocking.
Well, I think Keir Starmer himself has said the first duty of the Prime Minister is to keep the country safe. And what John Healey said in his resignation letter is that you are making the country less safe. And that's why it's so devastating.
I think it's devastating on a couple of levels because the charges are so high. Harriet's right. First duty of government, you've got to keep the country safe. He specifically says you are not keeping us safe at a time of rising threats. But he also does the countermand to that, which is you are sending other people's children overseas and you are putting them at risk because you're scrimping on the money. Because he says personnel on operations are at risk. So he's saying other people's children are being put at risk because of decisions you're making. And the way in which it's framed, this idea that you're unable, but it's the Treasury that's unwilling. So it's painting this picture that the Prime Minister, he probably does want to do this, but he's gone to ask Rachel and Rachel's told him no, and he's so powerless that he can't do anything about it.
But I think every cabinet member on hearing of John Healey's resignation will be thinking, does that mean I should be resigning too at this moment? Or does this mean I should be really backing Starmer full tilt because of this dangerous moment for Keir Starmer? Or should I just keep quiet? So this will affect every single cabinet member.
It feels hopeless for him, doesn't it, now?
He's a Potemkin Prime Minister and everyone can see it. Everyone can see it.
Because the Healey resignation did happen mid-group, we did ask the focus group, we did ask them what they thought about it. And actually, it turned out, we didn't know this, did we, until that Mike actually is a veteran, okay? So he was very interested on this and, he had a strong point of view, and this is what he said.
I'm a veteran, so, I served in the Air Force for 8 years and, it was in the 90s, but I think since then it's been pillared. The investment is not going in. We know that the threat is getting worse from, China and Russia and everywhere else. And they need to plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Absolutely. The top and bottom of it, and defence is important. Same as health's important. Yeah. You've got to find the money. You've got to balance the books to be able to invest in the right things at the right time. And at this moment in time, health is one and defence is another one.
Absolutely, yeah.
But Labour are good at giving money away. Obviously, we've talked about benefits before.
Yeah, definitely.
But they're not good at balancing them books because they need more investment, but they've got nowhere to get it from.
Now, one of the things that I thought came out really clearly from this focus group was this overarching feeling that everything that they talked about and the way that they framed everything, it was kind of about fairness. How they felt about immigration was all about fairness and who got what. And then again, when they talked about immigration, when they talked about what was happening in Belfast, what they said about Henry Novak's murder.
Just attending A&E, you can see a difference. Yeah. You go in and you can sit, and then if there's like a migrant coming in, it's seen straight away and quickly and done and out at A&E at Wigan. And you see it happen. And it's not, yes, it's children there soon, which we know can be a priority. It's back to the two-tier kind of aspect of things.
I don't really see immigration as such an issue that people make it out to be. I think from what I've seen, it seems to be the topic above all sort of things, especially with reform. And I don't really get it.
We can't have homes because you've placed these people in our community. And recent events with Novak and in Northern Ireland, streets are being attacked where migrants are being placed. And people see that's our homes. Our community changed. Yes, diversity is good. Integration is good. But if it's at the detriment of their own communities and families, they're going to kick off and go, I don't like this.
If you're a young couple or excuse me, an old couple or a single person with no children, and you're made homeless, then you're just left to fend for yourself. You won't get any, you won't be put up in a hotel or in temporary house or anything. You just got to wing it. Now, if you come over on a boat, on a dinghy, you're immediately, that night, you've got a bed for the night, you've got a roof over your head, you've got all your basic things that you need.
I mean, I think that sort of fairness framing actually, it pretty much sums up like the British psyche, right? Most British people believe in decency, fair play, contribution. You do your bit, you get rewarded. We look after each other when we fall on hard times. I often say this about, British people are not cruel. Well, the vast majority, obviously, some are. The vast majority of British people are not cruel. They believe in decency, they believe in fair play. And I think both left and right get that wrong sometimes.
So, just to go back to it, obviously my mum grew up here. So a lot of my mum's values I grew up with. And I was talking to a local politician here the other day that's, knows the area really well. And the way they described the voters of Makerfield as an essence was that they believe in a social contract. And that's what they believe in, and you need to understand that about them. And what this politician meant was exactly what Luke was saying, that it's not that people don't want to help people that are struggling, but they want them to put in. They want them to go to work. They want them to try. And it really struck me because it's this is a traditionally working class area, working class communities with really strong, certainly my grandparents to my parents, a hugely strong work ethic. And that's what I really picked up in this group, that these were very decent people. They were very fair. And they were feeling like the government was not hearing them or understanding concerns around immigration and some people getting things when other people were not, or concerns about welfare spending. And that didn't make them racist people, it didn't make them bigoted people. It seems to me that kind of social contract between the voters and the government is breaking down because the voters are feeling that things are happening and they're not being heard, particularly around immigration.
What they were basically saying is government doesn't feel like it's on our side.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel it's on the side of those values. And I think that's a really dangerous place for any government to be.
Luke apparently has to do other focus groups with other people, so now I feel cheated on.
Can't believe he's cheating on us.
Sorry, you're my favourite. You're my favourite.
Now.
No,
Luke's got to go, which is sad. We've spent all day together. I've had a lovely
thank you.
time.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Luke.
No, thank you.
Let's move on to Reform UK. Robert Kenyon nipping at Burnham's heels, but still behind in the polls. Now, Luke, rather, with blushes around the room, I think, sort of quoted some of Rob Kenyon's more fruity language, should we say.
This is from Robert Kenyon, the Reform candidate. So he said on the Rugby Forum, so I'll read you them and then I'm actually go to the women in the group first and then go more broadly. So, women can't drive or give directions. I'm sexist, sorry, but I am. European women all have really good figures and are good looking. And then he contrasts this with English women, writing, they don't care, just walk around with their fat bellies and odd shapes, pushing a pram at 16 in their PJs. An account which was sort of linked to him said on social media about Carol Vorderman, the presenter, happy birthday, Carol. My God, I would love to smell and lick your arsehole, to which Kenyon's his account replied, he's only saying what we're all thinking, with a thumbs up emoji and a laughing emoji.
I think a couple of things that struck me about that is we'd heard quite a lot of commentary saying that, this is really going to do for women voters and, it's really going to affect them in the polls. And actually the women in the focus group were pretty sanguine about it. And we're sort of a bit like, yeah, okay, that's a bit rum, but it's nothing I've not heard before. And for the ones that were from 15 years ago, they were saying, you can change your mind in 15 years. I think what irked them was that when he was on Question Time, Rob Kenyon didn't really apologise for them or give them an explanation or anything. And it was the lack of that seemed to irk them more than what was actually said, because a couple of them went out and said, everybody said daft things that they don't really mean. I thought what was more interesting was actually that the men in the focus group didn't dismiss them. those comments, that they actually took them quite seriously. And I was quite heartened by that, to be honest with you. And there was no kind of trying to wish it away as kind of banter, but they almost said it was a shame that he was being put up to fail like this. And on question time that he was out of his depth, that was used by two of the people that were speaking there. So I thought they were really fair-minded towards him. They wanted to give the guy a fair shake. There was no kind of prejudice for this fresh face from the constituency coming to them, but they were just kind of dissecting it quite rationally, I thought.
What I thought was interesting was that actually when it came to the issue of abortion, and his remarks on that, which were pretty offensive, they took that more seriously, because the sort of sexist stuff was a long time ago, but the abortion stuff was more around a belief that could lead to a set of policies, or the way you might conduct yourself as an MP. And actually it was interesting to me that they could kind of not forgive, but they were sort of like, sexist language or saying stupid things. But on abortion, and particularly Leah, who said she was anti-abortion, she really did not like that. And it was clear in the room that everyone was uncomfortable with how he spoke about that particular issue, more actually than some of the really offensive sexist language he'd used. What did you think of that, Harriet?
Well, I thought they didn't agree with what he said. Obviously, they didn't agree with it at all, but they were very forgiving of him. Well, it was 15 years ago. I obviously would be much less forgiving about it. But and I think, as you say, it was interesting that the men felt able to pick up on it, whereas the women were like, well, one of them said, well, I've got sons and it was a long time ago. But I think that they didn't agree with him on it, but they were quite forgiving of him.
So one of the things that interested me was that they were really willing to give Rob Kenyon a kind of fair shake, while at the same time, they were very critical of Nigel Farage. We think of Reform as being like a one-man band. You often talk about Reform as if it's a one-man band, and it's Nigel Farage's party in his own image and likeness, and that it's popular, therefore he is. And they were using words like slimy, the British Trump, they were, and saying that in a pejorative way, a snake oil salesman. Like, they were really, really quite critical of him, but they didn't project their own views of Farage onto the candidate here, which I thought was really interesting. Whereas the other party of the right, so they talked about Restore Britain, which is Rupert Lowe, who's a former MP of Reform, that's split and has set up another kind of a schism right party. They didn't know what the candidate's name was in the constituency for Restore, but they liked Rupert Lowe and they thought he was a better kind of vessel for that kind of... They called it a protest vote, but actually that wasn't even what they were talking about. They were just talking about a kind of more... kind of belt and braces, they would say common sense, like a different type of communication. And I just thought it was a really interesting sort of juxtaposition that they could give Rob Kenyon a fair shake, despite Farage being so dominant in his party, even though they didn't like Farage. But they couldn't give you could give them 100 goes at it. They could not name you the Restore candidate for their seat's name. But they liked Rupert Lowe, so he's clearly having some cut through.
I think what's happening is that there's all the extra scrutiny that there's been on Nigel Farage. It's showing the first signs that people are taking a closer look at Nigel Farage and starting to be more critical than they have been hitherto.
I thought it was... I have to say, I was not expecting the criticism of Nigel Farage around that group. You've got to remember that this constituency, all of the wards, all of the council wards that were up for election in May, they all voted Reform. They all went Reform. In Wigan, which is actually the neighbouring constituency... but 24 out of 25 of the council seats went to Reform. Not all of the council seats obviously were up for grabs this time around. So for Farage to kind of be criticised, and actually, Harriet, I picked up as well what you just said, which was Mike, who I think is instinctively more of a voter on the right. He referenced the £5 billion. He referenced the £5 million from Harman. No one brought that up it had cut through. Okay, look, we could talk about that focus group all day, and but that is all we have time for today. But before we go, we have some news for all of you dysfunctioners, because we're starting a podcast club for you, and it's launching next week.
Would it?
I nearly fell off my chair. I'm so excited. I felt like I had to do a little boogie with my disco lights behind. If you're not watching this, I've literally got disco lights behind me. You need to go online. You need to go on YouTube to have a look. It's called Sky News Insider. And if you're a member, you'll get ad-free listening to all our usual Friday episodes. Plus, you'll get an extra episode every single week. And I love podding with you guys. So we're going to be doing it more. We're going to be doing 2 podcasts a week now. So is everyone as excited as me?
The news is moving so fast that I'm not even sure 2 podcasts a week will be enough. I mean, it's what you're getting for now. But like, there is almost too much news in the world. Like every day you just wake up and there's more things have happened. So I will certainly not run out of things to say. That's for darn tootin'. But yeah, it's going to be so much fun to see you guys earlier in the week as well.
But look, just to make it really clear from the outset, very important piece of information. The normal Friday podcast is going to go out to everyone every week for free, as usual. We're not going anywhere. It's just like, if you really, really like us, if you are some of our super fans.
There is another thing. There is another part of this announcement, because it's not just going to be the 3 of us that's on those bonus episodes. We are welcoming back a former member of the ED Sisterhood. She's coming back to the podcast because Jess Phillips, now free from the shackles of government, is going to be coming back with us for some of those extra episodes that are going to be dropping earlier in the week.
Hard as it seems to believe, there's actually even more than that, because as well as exclusive access to our bonus episodes, which we've just been talking about, you'll get early access to tickets for our future live shows. You'll have the chance to chat directly to us on the subscriber forum, and I'm really looking forward to that. We're calling it the Insider Interchange, and you'll get bonus content from our sister US podcast, Trump 100, and a brand new podcast from Sky News's Ed Conway called Stuff Matters. It's a brilliant look inside what makes up our world.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that Ed Conway podcast, I have to say. But I'm also an Ed Conway super fan, so I'd actually pay for that. Talking about paying for it, I should probably tell you, it does cost £2.99 a month.
So coming in with the T's and C's, I'm going to say that it auto-renews at the standard price. That is currently, as Beth says, $2.99 per month or $29.99 per year, unless cancelled via My Account. You can cancel any time, effective at the end of the billing period. It is UK only and for 18s plus. So the whole Sky News Insider Club is going to launch this coming Monday, so you'll have to wait until then to subscribe. We will come back with all the details of how you do it here on the podcast, and our first subscriber-only episode will be here on Tuesday. So keep an eye on our social accounts too, because we'll post all of the links there, but we cannot stress enough that this normal Friday episode is going to stay exactly the same.
God, it's so exciting. I need to lie down now. I'm so excited. I need to get ready for next Tuesday for the second bonus episode. The burner phone is still going strong, so send us your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, anything. We love hearing from you. The number to WhatsApp is 07934 200 444, or email us at electoraldysfunction. But that is it for this week. We will see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.